Which country holds the absolute most power and influence in the world today? Politics, economy, culture, arts, society, and science. A nation that stands at the very center, holding the rest of the globe in the palm of its hand. It is, of course, the United States of America. But has America always been this global titan? Believe it or not, this nation was born only about 250 years ago. How did it manage to rise to the top and become the most significant player on the world stage in such a short time? To understand the America we see today, we have to look at its history written in blood. The full, uncensored story of America's founding. We're uncovering it all right here on Flat Archive. Hello everyone. Starting today, I'm going to take you on a journey through the true story of how America was built. Now, I know this story has been told 1,000 times, but instead of just listing dates and facts, we're going to connect the scattered dots to reveal the massive flow of history in this deep dive series. July 4th, 1776. With the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the America we know today was born. So who exactly was America declaring independence from? You guessed it, Great Britain. The 13 colonies established by Britain on the North American continent fought a fierce war against their mother country. That victory marked the beginning of the United States. But we have to ask, why was the Revolutionary War inevitable? And what was the ultimate reason Britain established colonies in America in the first place? To find the answer, we need to turn back the clock all the way to 15th century Europe. By the late 15th century, European nations began looking across the ocean, dreaming of a new world. But why suddenly leave home? Well, there were a few key reasons. The Black Death had previously wiped out a third of Europe's population, but after about 150 years, the population bounced back and commerce was revived. Naturally, this completely reshaped the social structure. With more people came a higher demand for foreign goods. This created jobs for merchants, explorers, and adventurers. And out of necessity, navigation technology began to improve at a rapid pace. The trade with the East, spices, gold, these weren't just commodities, they were tickets to instant, unimaginable wealth. Here's the crazy part. If you sent out 3 ships and 2 sank, leaving only 1 to return alive, you would still make a killing. That's how high the profit margins were. Picture this. A dock worker moving crates of spice sneaks just 1 handful into his pocket. That 1 handful could buy him a house and change his life forever. That is the kind of insane money we're talking about. It's worth risking my life. That was the mindset, and so the race to reach East Asia began. At the center of this storm stood one man. A 16th century Spanish chronicler once described him like this: "His discovery is the greatest event since the creation of the world." We grew up knowing him as a hero, the embodiment of the spirit of exploration who discovered a new world. But there's another side to this coin. Critics argue celebrating his discovery is no different than celebrating the crimes of a murderer. This controversial figure is none other than the Italian-born Christopher Columbus. Though born in Genoa, Columbus cut his teeth as a sailor in Portugal. He had a radical idea. Instead of sailing east, he would sail west across the Atlantic to reach Asia. Why? Because the traditional route around Africa's Cape of Good Hope was essentially a suicide mission. Columbus took his pitch to the King of Portugal, asking for funding. The answer was a hard no. The first reason was simple math. When Columbus presented his report on the Earth's size, his calculations were, well, let's just say a bit off. He estimated the Earth to be about 1/3 smaller than it actually is. He calculated the distance from the Canary Islands to Japan as roughly 2,760 miles. In reality, it was over 12,200 miles, more than 4 times his estimate. So, naturally, the royal court looked at his numbers and said, "We can't trust this. Your math is completely wrong." The second reason was his ego. He didn't just want ships and supplies to open a new trade route. He demanded the title of admiral, giving him full jurisdiction over the ocean, and, get this, the power of life and death. On top of that, he wanted a perpetual 10% cut of all profits from any new lands discovered. Portugal, not being the wealthiest nation at the time, basically said, "You're dreaming." So Columbus packed his bags for Spain. He approached the famous power couple, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, begging them to back his westward voyage. After much hesitation, Ferdinand and Isabella actually said yes. Why? Because Columbus knew exactly how to play them. He understood that these two monarchs saw themselves as the ultimate defenders of the Catholic faith. He promised that the profits from his voyage would fund the spread of Catholicism and even help retake Jerusalem from Islamic rule. But there was another, more practical reason: pure rivalry with Portugal. Even back then, Spain was much larger than Portugal. Yet Portugal was the one dominating the seas and the lucrative spice trade. Spain was terrified that this immense wealth would tip the balance of power, leaving them in the dust. They realized, we need to get in the game, even if we're late. That fear of missing out is ultimately why they accepted Columbus's proposal. But here's the kicker: Spain wasn't exactly swimming in cash either. Queen Isabella was so committed that she reportedly pawned her own jewelry just to fund Columbus's ships. In 1492, the green light is given. Columbus immediately set sail into the Atlantic with 3 ships and a crew of 90 men. After 10 grueling weeks at sea, they finally spot land. Columbus was absolutely convinced he had stepped foot in Asia. Reality check: he had actually landed in the Bahamas. Later, he sailed to Cuba, but in his mind, he was certain he had reached China. Believing he was in the East Indies, he looked at the Native Americans and called them Indios, the Spanish word for people of India. Because of this one geographical blunder, they were stripped of their true names and labeled Indians for centuries. That label stuck, becoming the official term used throughout American history. Upon meeting the natives, Columbus wrote these chilling words in his journal: "They should be good servants, for they repeat what we say to them. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want." In other words, because they were peaceful and lacked advanced weapons, he saw them as easy targets for conquest. It gets worse. In a report to the Spanish king, he counted the native women as 7 heads. He used the specific word for counting livestock, not people. To him, these human beings were no different than cattle. Throughout the expedition, Columbus was obsessed with one thing: monetization. He heard aloe was valuable, so he loaded up about 2,200 pounds of it. He scoured the ocean floor for pearls. Basically, he turned the New World upside down looking for anything he could sell. To prove his success to Queen Isabella, he returned to Spain with trophies, green parrots, and 7 kidnapped natives. But the cost was high. He lost 2 of his 3 ships and had to leave 39 of his crew members behind on the island because they couldn't fit on the last remaining boat. Regardless of the losses, Columbus returned to a hero's welcome, and just 1 year later, he was ready to set sail again. The goal for the second voyage wasn't just exploration anymore. It was about building a full-blown settlement colony. The plan was simple: plant Spanish roots in the New World, seize the land, and dominate the native population. Columbus had a grand vision for himself. He wouldn't just be an admiral, he would be the viceroy, ruling over this new land like a king. Because the goal was total domination, this second voyage turned into a bloodbath of brutal massacres. September 25th, 1493. Columbus set sail with a massive armada, 17 ships and over 1,200 men. Since he was now hailed as a Spanish hero, the scale of this expedition was light years beyond the first one. On the way, near St. Croix, the fleet encountered natives in a canoe. Columbus's response? He ordered them all to be beheaded immediately. It gets even more gruesome. When one of the natives, holding his own guts from a stomach wound, tried to crawl away, the soldiers threw him overboard and shot him with arrows just to make sure he couldn't warn his tribe. The slaughter didn't end there. When Columbus returned to check on the 39 men he'd left behind, he found the fort destroyed and everyone dead. Consumed by rage and a desire for revenge, he began a campaign of ruthless killing against the natives. He then forced the natives into labor to build a new colonial city. He named it La Isabela, in honor of the Queen. But the location was terrible and the settlement failed. So they moved on and founded a new city, Santo Domingo, the present-day capital of the Dominican Republic. This time, the settlement stuck. But as the Spanish settlements thrived, the lives of the Native Americans turned into a living hell. When the land didn't yield enough gold or spices, Columbus pivoted to a new business model: human trafficking. He rounded up about 550 natives and shipped them off to Spain as slaves. He was still obsessed with gold, though. When the natives couldn't find any, his frustration turned into sadistic violence. The Spanish demanded gold quotas that were impossible to meet because the gold simply wasn't there. The punishment for missing a quota? They would chop off the natives' hands. The despair was so deep that indigenous parents drowned their own children to save them from slavery. Mass suicides became common. By 1498, Columbus set out on his third voyage, but his reputation was tanking. He hadn't paid his debts, he hadn't brought back the gold, and rumors of his brutality were spreading. With funding drying up, he left with a much smaller crew, just 226 men and 8 ships. This time, he actually reached the South American mainland. It was only then that he realized this isn't Asia, it's a completely different continent. But the bottom line? Still no gold. He couldn't control the colonial rebellions, and the charges of abuse piled up. The man who wanted to be a king was eventually arrested, chained like a criminal, and shipped back to Spain in shackles. Even after Columbus's voyages, Spain didn't hit the brakes on exploration. Not even close. They had one single obsession driving them forward: gold. They went into a mining frenzy. Over the next 300 years, Spanish mines in the Americas extracted 10 times more gold and silver than all other mines in the world combined. And following in Columbus's footsteps came another man who would crush the continent under his boot: Hernán Cortés. Cortés set his sights on the Aztec Empire, a massive power that ruled over the Valley of Mexico. His strategy? He took the emperor hostage, seizing control of the empire without a major battle. But the moment Cortés left the city for a brief period, all hell broke loose. An unexpected bloodbath began. It was a traditional Aztec festival day. The locals were preparing for a celebration, but Cortés's men, paranoid and on edge, mistook the gathering for a rebellion plot. They opened fire, starting a massacre. In that chaos, 600 Aztec citizens were slaughtered. The Aztecs, fueled by rage, fought back with everything they had. When Cortés returned, the rebellion was so fierce that he was forced to flee for his life. It was a disaster for the Spanish. Over 1,000 soldiers and native allies were killed. Cortés himself even lost 2 fingers in the fighting. History remembers this night as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. But Cortés wasn't done. He retreated, regrouped, and launched a counterattack to crush the Aztecs once and for all. He cut the city's aqueduct, choking off their water supply, and laid siege to Tenochtitlan. Trapped, starving, and riddled with disease, the Aztecs somehow held out for 70 agonizing days. But bravery couldn't beat technology. They stood no chance against Cortés's arsenal of muskets, cannons, and steel. Now, on paper, the Aztecs had way more soldiers, but they had 2 fatal problems. First, the technology gap was massive. The Aztecs were fighting with wooden clubs embedded with obsidian shards and throwing stones. Against steel armor, it didn't matter how many men they had, their attacks were simply ineffective. And then came the Spanish secret weapon, the thing the Aztecs feared more than guns: giant dogs known as mastiffs. Cortés trained these war dogs to hunt humans, and true to their training, these beasts would tear through the native ranks, mauling and killing on command. In the end, about 100,000 Aztecs lay dead, with their population decimated and internal civil war breaking out. The great Aztec Empire finally fell to its knees. If you thought Cortés was bad, wait until you meet the man who might just surpass him in infamy: Francisco Pizarro. Pizarro heard about Cortés's success and thought, if he can do it, so can I. Driven by rumors of a golden kingdom hidden in South America, he rallied his own expedition team. In January 1531, he marched into the Inca Empire in present-day Peru. This wasn't some small tribe. It was a massive empire of gold, with a population of 9 million and a standing army of 70,000 soldiers. Pizarro sent a translator and a Catholic priest to confront the Inca leader, Atahualpa. They delivered a strict ultimatum: submit to the laws of Jesus Christ in the name of God and the King of Spain. Atahualpa asked to see the Bible. The priest handed it over, but it was closed. When the priest reached out to help him open it, Atahualpa, offended by the gesture, struck the priest's arm, as if to say, "How dare you?" The Bible fell to the ground. Seizing the moment, the priest screamed out to Pizarro, "Atahualpa has thrown the holy book to the earth!" That was the signal. Within less than 2 years, the mighty Inca Empire completely collapsed under the Spanish conquerors. By the late 16th century, Spain was unstoppable. They controlled the Caribbean, Mexico, and stretched all the way down through South America, covering modern-day Chile, Argentina, and Peru. And briefly, around 1580, when the Spanish and Portuguese crowns united, their grip even extended to Brazil. As Spain swept through Latin America and hoarded massive amounts of gold, their rivals across the ocean, Britain and France, started getting very nervous. We can't just sit here and watch. That sense of crisis, that was the spark. It was the fuse that would eventually drive them to the North American continent. But still, it begs the question, even with inferior weapons, how did massive empires crumble so easily before just a handful of Europeans? Historians point to a few key factors. The biggest killer wasn't steel, it was biology. The Europeans brought diseases that the natives had zero immunity against. Influenza, measles, typhus. Millions were wiped out by these invisible enemies. There are records from the Mayan region of Mexico showing that within just a few years of contact, 95% of the native population had perished. And as the natives died in droves, the Europeans twisted this tragedy to fit their narrative. They claimed this mass death was proof of God's will, a divine sign that they were destined to rule over the New World. Now, some people might look at this history and ask, aren't cruelty and violence just the necessary engines of human progress? I fundamentally disagree. Yes, it is inevitable for humans to expand, connect, and build nations. We are not meant to live in isolation. However, we have to face the fact that for 99% of our history, that growth has been paved with violence, looting, and what we call a history of blood. Does that mean we justify it? Absolutely not. We strive to learn from it, to build a society based on dialogue and cooperation, not conquest. We look back at this bloody past not to celebrate it, but to find the will and the lessons to choose a different path forward. That is the true purpose of history.